Jordan Reed, and this is the Ramshackle Glam Audioblog. I'm currently sitting in my bedroom under a sort of contraption I made out of various chairs and bar stools and sheets, because apparently this is how you record audio when you don't have a studio. So apologies if, you hear a dog barking or if I die of heat exhaustion at some point during this broadcast, because this is my first time doing anything like this. So I have already had to delete this entire recording and start over because apparently I had a metronome turned on, which is extremely annoying to listen to. Anyway, and I also, hear that? If I move my head, my ponytail scrapes against the sheet hanging over me and makes a terrible, horrible sound. So it's a learning process. All right. So what is an audioblog, you ask? It is my blog, except you can listen to it. Because, really, who reads blogs anymore? Do you? Anyone? Anyone out there? Bueller? And now you have something to do while walking your dog or making your way to work, or in the case of this particular episode, driving your kids over to your co-parents. A little bit of background in case you're not familiar with Ramshackle Glam. I started writing the blog, Ramshackle Glam, in 2009 when influencer wasn't yet a word, and I kind of wish it had stayed that way. Personal branding, it wasn't a thing, ditto. And I have to say that boyfriend blazer was the height of fashion. In my opinion, it definitely still is. I started writing because I had left my acting career in what could accurately be termed a ball of flames. It's a really good story. It involves Ron Jeremy, but I'll tell that another day. And I started working in HR at a law firm, which could accurately be termed my own personal version of hell. Unsurprisingly, I did get fired from that job. More accurately, my boss kindly made it feel like it was my choice, but when you spend your days crying so loudly that you can be heard through your closed office door, it doesn't really engender a positive corporate culture. Next, I tried to get a job in the journalism industry, but this was 2009 when the entire print magazine industry was in a full-blown panic attack, and they weren't exactly hiring. So I got offered an unpaid internship, except I was technically, albeit debatably, a functional adult, and I kind of needed to get paid. But I still wanted to write. I needed to write since I was 4 years old. And so after a fortuitous chance encounter with a woman I met at a party who, quote, blogged for a living, whatever that meant, I started my own. At this point, I've been writing about my life from my divorce to my clinically diagnosed anxiety disorder to various unfortunate trips to IKEA. Pro tip, don't do that if you want to stay married. At least don't do it with your significant other. I've been writing for over 12 years, and I have a lot of stories to tell. And so for this audioblog, hashtag copyright TM, I don't know. I've plucked out my very favorite posts over the years on assorted topics, and I've recorded them right here for you. The first story I'm going to tell is on the wildly uplifting topic of divorce. Fun, I know. So, you know how they say you have to make all these horrible dating mistakes before you're able to open yourself up to a healthy long-term relationship? That might not be how it goes for everyone, but that was definitely how it went for me. I fell in love for the first time when I was 17 and broke up with that boyfriend when I was 19. And then again, when I was 22, it was a roller coaster. And for a long time, I thought that the way I felt about him, that was it. It doesn't get better than that. I'd been told once or twice that when you fall in love for the first time, you never love anyone the same way you love your first love. And for a really long time, I believed that was true. And then I met Kendrick, my now ex-husband, and I discovered it wasn't true. It was possible to love someone so much more. So our marriage, I put this in quotation marks, like worked, because I don't love that word. It implies there's a right way and a wrong way to do marriage. And of course there isn't. But for a long time it did work, not just because he made my heart melt in a, like, nobody puts baby in a corner kind of way. He did, but I think it worked because we met at a time when both of us had gone through so much that we were able to recognize what we had in each other and run with it. And when I was 20, it just simply wouldn't have been a possibility. Love is a lot, but it's not always enough. Eventually, as the years passed, it turned out that it wasn't enough for us either. And after it was almost 10 years of trying to make it be enough, we stopped. The reasons for the breakdown of our marriage are as mundane and dramatic and both at the same time as I'm sure the reasons that for most marriages ending are. But that story is not one that I feel like is mine to tell. I feel like my story is my own journey into the post-divorce landscape. So let's start at the beginning. It seems like a good place to, begin. Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy. In February of 2007, I was hired for what might be the single most bizarre and also amazing job I've ever had. An up-and-coming fashion brand called Travada. I don't think they're still around, but perhaps. They hired me and another actor named Clint and flew us from Los Angeles to New York City to take on the roles of Elisabetta and Nicolae Petrescu. You like my accent? It's good, right? We were playing siblings from some obscure Eastern European royal family who had arrived in New York to take Fashion Week by storm. Basically, what they did was make us famous socialites overnight. They hired a fancy PR team to get us in wherever we wanted to go. They drove us around town in a white vintage Rolls Royce accompanied by, bodyguards and a cat handler. We carried this very stinky cat with us wherever we went, and there was a lady who came with the cat, and she was the cat handler. And we actually ended up earning the name the Cat People in the press. And there was a lot of press, which was the point. The brand's founder had this theory that doing this stunt would get way more attention than a traditional and extremely expensive fashion show. And he was right. Trust me, I'm aware that swanning around Fashion Week parties, drinking champagne hardly sounds like hard work. But when you have to be playing a role every single second and screwing up your, completely DIY'd accent means getting outed as fakes in the press, it was tiring. I actually did end up getting outed, by the way. I was at the Beatrice Inn, which was this very cool underground club that specialized in open use of cocaine and other positive life choices. And I was spotted by a high school classmate. Jordan? She says. And I mumbled something like, that's Romanian, by the way. Officially. Why are you pretending you don't speak English? And at that, I had one of my bodyguards whisk me away. Actually, that very same night that I met the person who would become my husband, Kendrick and I had been corresponding a bit over email because I had friend requested his band on MySpace. This is all very mid 2000s. I went to high school with two of the members of the band. And when I mentioned that I'd be in New York for Fashion Week, he suggested we meet up. I told him we couldn't because we were working 17-hour days, but he was very relentless. And I ended up meeting him at an all-night diner at 3 a.m. He brought a flower, a rose, and a bottle of red wine and a bottle of white wine because he didn't know which I preferred. A few weeks later, he flew out to LA to spend the weekend with me, and I don't know how to describe it other than somehow over phone calls and, emails, we fell madly in love. The kind of love where being apart from someone for even a minute, it feels like torture. It's also the kind of love that, in other words, probably shouldn't result in marriage in the absence of things like time and rational thought, but let's just skip over that part. A couple of hours after Kendrick landed at LAX, we decided to drive to Vegas for the night. We booked the cheapest hotel room we could find, Treasure Island, very classy. We stashed our bags, and then we made our way down the Strip. We drank, oh my God, so much bad champagne, and we chased each other through hotel lobbies, and we crashed parties and clubs, and we had a stranger take a photograph of us outside the Hard Rock. I was wearing this vintage lace white mini dress because in my crazy 26-year-old head, I was absolutely certain that we were either going to get engaged or married that night. Kendrick did not know this. He wasn't privy to this plan. Around 3 a.m., we head back to our room, and it had a mirrored ceiling. I feel like that's an important detail to share. And all of a sudden, Kendrick was down on one knee and asking me to marry him. And I should have been surprised, but I wasn't. And apparently he was surprised, though, because he had, obviously he didn't have a ring. He had I think he tried to use like a paper clip or a string from his shirt. But we took my mother's original engagement ring that she had given me a long time ago, and we put it onto my left-hand ring finger. And then we weren't in the mood to go to sleep, and so we decided to run out of the hotel room screaming, "We're engaged," at everyone. Bachelorette parties tend to cheer for you when you say that. And we hailed a cab, and we went to a pawn shop. And in the pawn shop, we went straight to the diamond ring section, and I finally pointed and said, "That one." And it was this wide woven band and had 3 little diamonds on it that were all differently sized, not intentionally. And it was $350. And Kendrick said, "It's yours." And I was like, "But can you afford it?" And he was like, "Yes." And so he actually, the next morning, he had to call his landlord. Fortunately, this was the mother of his drummer. He was sleeping on their couch at the time. And he was like, "So I can't pay rent this month because I got engaged." And she was very sweet. And she said that was fine. One funny thing is when we left the pawn shop, Kendrick decided to get down on one knee in the parking lot to like re-propose with an actual ring. And this guy walking by was like, did he just propose to you in a parking lot? And I was like, "Yes." And he said, "You should say no." And we ended up hitching a ride back to our hotel with a group of very wasted people who ended up kicking us out of their car because we weren't paying for their gas and blah, blah, blah. Anyway. But it was romantic because the evening ended with us walking back towards our hotel as the sun rose, and we're saying, "I can't believe this," over and over and over. And we felt like, we'd gone and done it. We found true love. And it was as simple and unbelievable as that. The ones who catch you. A few years ago, shortly before my daughter was born, a friend of mine told me she had cancer. When I say a friend of mine, I mean it was someone I cared about. It was someone I had special, beautiful memories with. Someone I thought was smart and interesting, and someone who had just had a baby a couple of months earlier, making her diagnosis worse than the worst thing imaginable. But by that point in our lives, we weren't especially tied into each other. We'd been casual going out friends back in the day, and in the years since, we'd grown up and we'd gone out of bars and parties and dartboards, and so we were just sort of in an emailing occasionally relationship. And when the dust settled, it turned out we didn't really have much in common at all, and we lost touch. I didn't even know what she did for a living or her partner's name. And then she got cancer. We emailed about it a bit. I didn't know what to say. I wondered whether I should come offer to watch her daughter or drive her to appointments, or, whether it was my responsibility to be that person who showed up for her, because I knew so many people wouldn't be. That's just how it goes when someone gets sick. But shamefully, maybe, selfishly, definitely, I didn't want to be that person. And so I wasn't. And a few months after that, I moved to California, and, life went on, and we didn't email again. A while after we moved, I saw that she put up a post on Facebook about how when you get cancer, you learn who your real friends are. And I told myself the post wasn't about me. I mean, we'd never been that close, right? But it could have been. When push came to shove, I didn't show up. There are a few things that happen when your life falls apart, and as it turns out, not all of them are terrible. You discover what you can do without. You discover what you won't give up. And you discover what my friend realized all those years ago and what I'm realizing now. It's only when it all goes to hell that you find your people. A little over a week ago, I asked Kendrick, the father of my children, my partner for almost a decade, or more than a decade, including our engagement, and a person who I love impossibly, for a separation. The days since have been the worst of my life. And yet they've also unearthed something I never expected, a discovery so beautiful, it shocked me to my core. I have friends. I am so lucky. I almost can't believe it. Me, who always felt strange and awkward and like I had to fake it, all of it, to make a person like me. It turns out I can be the saddest, most vulnerable and uncomfortable version of myself, and there are people who are there anyway. In my 20s, I did a lot of drugs in the pursuit of making myself fun in the way I thought people wanted me to be. I never believed that someone could love me if I wasn't offering them something concrete, a companion for, a wild night out, or a tab that I'm paying for, a beautiful house to hang at. I remember always wanting to hand over some sort of goodie bag that people could take home as a reward for having lent me their time. And then I told my husband I needed a break. And now we're on one, and life as I know it has collapsed. As I said, I'm not going to talk about the whys and hows because I have nothing bad to say and wouldn't say it even if I did. But love is not our problem. We've been stuck for years, tumbling around and around in each other's anger and resentment and fear and never really breaking through, or at least not for long. And it felt like the only option left was to create a space in which we could clean up our grown-up messes without making our kids a part of them. Now, I have a propensity for melodrama, so let me try not to overstate how I'm doing. In front of my children, I am a circus clown. I'm cheery, I'm full of ideas for craft projects and sparkly objects we can retrieve from the deep end of the pool. And then they cross the street to their friend's house for a play date, and I do yet another Google search for rental apartments I might be able to afford, but probably can't. I think about my husband. I miss him. And then I curl into a ball, my forehead on the kitchen floor, and I scream like someone is trying to tear out my insides. Right now, every single part of my life is a moving piece, and I am not someone who especially loves walking forward into the dark. I've been making this joke lately, the kind of joke that is not really a joke at all and definitely won't make anyone laugh. How's it going? Someone will ask me. And I'll respond, the world is broken and cold, but I'm great. Ha 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 ha. And then I will get in my car and check my phone or return to my house and open my email. I will find missed calls from my mother and my father, a text from one friend, I love you. That's all. An email from another who never stops checking on me, even though I'm shitty at responding, and a group text from two women who've only been in my life for a couple of years, but who collectively decided to ignore me when I said, I'm fine, I'm really fine, and came over the second their children fell asleep. 2 days ago, I called one of my oldest, dearest friends, one of my college roommates, Nesrin. I gave her a brief update on my life, and the next day she booked a flight to San Jose. She was texting me to let me know that she'd landed and was en route with coffee for us and pastries for the kids. In the afternoon, she made the macaroni and cheese and waffles and told me to stop apologizing and go take a nap. I've wanted friends forever. It took my life exploding for me to realize that they've been there all along. Bad things happen. Careers collapse, people get sick, relationships break. And then sometimes, when one of your nightmares come true, you wake up and discover that your people are there to catch you when you fall. This is how it always is. If we're being honest, I don't think it was my marriage that broke me. It was all the marriages. I just finished reading this book, Fleischman is in Trouble. It's about divorce, and specifically about a woman who one day simply disappears. She abandons her marriage and her job and her children while her husband holds up the fort, so to speak. It involves major twists that I won't spoil for you because you should read it, but I don't think it's a spoiler to tell you what I took away from it, which is that this book explained my own story to me in a way I hadn't fully comprehended before. At the crux of the issue is the plight of the working mother. I shy away from this topic on Ramshackle Glam because in our present culture, there's completely valid sensitivity to the different ways women approach parenting. There's a danger when you identify yourself as a working mother of creating distance between yourself and the other kind of mother, the one who doesn't work. But who does? Of course she does. She does the hardest job. And it's true. Being a parent is the hardest job you will ever have. But I'm a parent, and I also have a job, both because I have to and because I want to, by which I mean I also have to for myself. I don't judge women whose calling is to be with their children all day, every day. I admire them and I respect their choice. But I'm tired of pretending that what we do are variations on a theme. Because when we do this, we run the risk of ignoring what's happening to working mothers, which is that they are trapped in a system designed to break them. Forget about striations of hardness or effort. It's all hard. Life is hard when you're a grown-up. There are specific hardnesses unique to the work of staying home with one's children. I couldn't do it, and I mean that, in the same way that I could not be an economist because I'm poor at math, and I could not run a dog grooming business because I like my own dogs, but not other people's. I'm fortunate that I have the resources to ensure that even if I can't lay eyes upon my children every moment of every day, they'll have other eyes laid upon them. And so I can attend to my next highest need in Maslow's hierarchy, which is to write. But when I was married, here's what I did. I worked. I wrote books and negotiated deals and shot campaigns and hosted shows. I worked all day, every day, and every night and every weekend because that's what you do when you work for yourself. I made more money each year than my husband, sometimes exponentially. That's not a slight on him, it's just a fact. I cared for our children. Not solely, of course. Some years they were in daycare, and some years they had a nanny, and some years when they were very young, I rationalized that I could do two things at once. Why not? I can do it all. And so I wrote with one hand, and I held a hungry mouth to my breast with the other, icing my nipples when they cracked and bled so I could do it again and again and again. They had and have two parents who both love them madly, of course. But on the day our first child was born and our job descriptions were issued, it became very clear that they would never be the same. I cared for our home. Paid the bills, hammered the nails, called the repairman when the washing machine broke, kept a laser eye focus on our equity line and current interest rates, and does it make sense to refinance? I made the appointments, volunteered for the pumpkin patch trips, cultivated the friendships that would lead to play dates that would create a village that I hoped would keep my children safe in this often lonely world. I planned the weekend trips and kept track of when the towels needed to be washed and returned the field trip forms and scheduled the well visits. I rocked bouncy chairs with one hand and typed with the other. And when someone got sick, I switched the in-person meeting to a Skype, and I recited the apology I knew by heart. This is not, of course, the only perspective on how it went. Just as so much of what I did was invisible, I am certain that there was much that was invisible to me too. I'm completely certain that I fell short in, oh my God, so many ways. some of which I'm now aware of, and some I'm sure that I'll never learn about. But what it all added up to was an exhaustion so profound that it made me furious. And then angrier still that the only thing to do with that fury was bury it so deep that I could pretend it wasn't there. Jordan, my mom said one day when I confessed to my anger, resentment, my exhaustion, that's just the way marriage is. Men do what they do and the women do the rest. This is how it always is. It's not anybody's fault. Or maybe it's everybody's. So I kept going. I worked and I worked and I worked even when I wasn't working because everything outside of my actual job was also my job. And then when night fell and the darkening sky said, it's okay, you can rest, I still couldn't rest. Just like you can't rest. Because the day has ended, but it's also just begun. There are meals to be made and sheets to be changed and emails that demand to be read because there's no such thing as after hours anymore. And then there's your partner. They may feel anxious or unfulfilled or frustrated or any of the many things that people are allowed to feel when they're released from their workplaces into the world. And you understand these feelings. Of course you do. You feel them too. And so you twist your face into what you hope is an accurate representation of empathy and make sure that whatever you say or doesn't say doesn't make the feelings worse. And while you're making sure not to make those feelings worse, watching your words and your gestures and tiptoeing around egos and patterns and long simmering discontent that's never been quite resolved, you're also making dinner and making beds and making sure the health insurance deductible got paid. And did I mention that your children are right there, sitting in their front row seats, absorbing it all? Eventually, of course, you cannot do this anymore. The dance where you do too much and pretend that you do not. Because if your partner really knew the true volume of what you carry in your mind every moment of every day, they might get defensive. And you don't want to fight. A fight's just one more thing you'll have to do. And even if they do hear you, it's not going to change anything, so why bother? This is how it always is. You can do it, other women do it, and so you keep your mouth shut, mostly, only occasionally allowing it to open enough to let a drop of poison slip out. You know that if you're ever honest, really, really, truly honest about how you feel, which is that none of this, not a single thing about it is okay, you'll fuck it all up. So you skip being honest. And one day it's too much. And you explode. And you fuck it all up anyway. The reader. The strangest thing happened over the weekend. I dropped off the kids with their dad for a bit, and I headed back home. I was intending to check a bunch of things off my to-do list, fold laundry, start dinner, vacuum, whatever. And then I thought, fuck it. None of these things are things that can't wait. I'm going to do what I want for a minute. I'm going to do something that makes me happy. And then I realized I had absolutely no idea what that might be. I'm serious. I had virtually no idea what I might want to do. Just me with no one else's wants to think about. Did I want to read or nap or watch a movie? I sifted through all the things that sounded like, things that people do when they're relaxing. But nothing sounded even vaguely appealing. You know what I really wanted to do? I wanted to fold laundry and start dinner and tick boxes off lists. A week ago or so, I had an online tarot card reading done. I've always been a big believer in tarot, not because I think the cards will predict the future or anything like that. I view a reading as an opportunity to talk through the central issues in your life with someone who's objective and theoretically very intuitive. Ultimately, it's up to you to figure out what the reading means. And I think there's something very powerful about exploring a problem from a completely new angle. The reading was almost stunningly spot on and thoughtful and relevant to my situation. But one of the many parts I kept coming back to was this. The reader told me that the spread was about taking ownership of enormous internal resources and being proud of them and the things that they have helped you create. Which made me wonder, am I proud of myself? Of the life I've built? When I stop and think about this idea of pride, the easy answer is yes, I'm proud. But what strikes me is how many of the sources of my pride are external. A book I wrote, a room I decorated, the fact that I've been teaching the kids to read and they're doing a good job at it. I am proud of the fact that I do so much all at the same time and that I never stop ever. I get shit done and done well. That's my thing, my personal narrative or whatever. Thanks, therapy. But standing there alone in my silent house with really nothing at all that I had to do, and yet still unable to stop trying to figure out what needed to be done, for the first time, it struck me as odd. I had to wonder, what if some or a lot of this nonstop work I've spent so many years doing wasn't necessary? What if I've spent years creating work for myself that didn't even need to exist? And what if, and this is the big one, the reason I've done this is to put off what I'm afraid I might discover when all the boxes are finally checked and all the lists are finally finished? I might not actually know myself very well at all. Because myself, not the things I do, just me, it's not a thing I've ever given a whole lot of thought to. Am I proud of myself? I have no idea how to answer that question. I work, I vacuum, I do load after load of laundry and make sure my kids get to gymnastics class on time, and I fill up the bowl on the table with fresh fruit whenever it runs low. I wake up, I roll over and check emails, and then run whatever the day's marathon is, and at the end of the day, when it's time to slow down, I sit down to watch a movie with my kids. I sit down, and, like clockwork, my mind spirals off into the dirty dishes in the sink and the proposal I haven't finished and the fact that I should really check the bank account because the mortgage is due soon. And then all of a sudden I'm sliding out from between them and whispering, I have to do one thing, I'll be right back. But then one thing becomes 20 and all of a sudden it's later and the movie is over. I want to sit through the whole movie. I want to know whether I like it or whether there's one I might like better. I think this shifting, painful, impossible moment in my life might just be a good time to find out. Sitting in my backyard thinking about shutters. Weirdly enough, I haven't been crying much about moving. The actual fact of selling our family house and going to another one, this time alone. Don't get me wrong, I've been crying about other things. God, so much, to the point where I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and have to mainline 6 glasses of water because my body is fresh out of fluid. But about the house itself, I've been pretty all business all the time. I mean, we're in escrow. I have solar panel lease transfers to sign, boxes to pack, schools to notify, children to keep safeguarded from everything that's swirling around them. We have to be out of this house in 3 weeks. I have to book a moving company, except I don't even know what date to book them for because pieces are still moving, every day in directions I never saw coming. Today, it was the shutters that knocked me flat on my back. They're cheap shutters, not those fancy custom real wood ones. I ordered them online hoping my measurements were accurate, and I celebrated a little when they arrived and I discovered that they did indeed fit into the spots I'd intended. I nailed them into the stucco myself, and not very well. I remember the day I did it, I was struggling with the level and I couldn't get the mollies in on the first couple of tries. I worried about the holes I left. I wondered whether the shutters would end up covering my mistakes. They did, and I was relieved. I loved how they looked against the walls, painted in the color I'd chosen after hours spent sifting through swatches of dove whites and cool whites and white whites. I love them still. So now I sit here in my backyard looking at my shutters, thinking about how I really should go get around to packing the string lights hanging above them. My kids are watching Big Hero 6 and eating macaroni and cheese in what used to be our garage and is now a magical play space that I made just for them, with a box of costumes in one corner and a hand-whittled ladder leading up to a lofted bedroom in the other. I joked about that ladder and that loft with my friends. When they're teenagers, I'll have to install security cameras up there to make sure they're not getting into trouble. They will be teenagers, and they will get in trouble, but not in that loft. I sit here, and I think about the people who bought our house and who will live in it before my son turns 7 next month. I know they're excited and that they love it. I'm happy for them. But still, I wonder if they will notice the shutters. I wonder whether they might notice how they weren't hung quite straight and replace them. I know a house is just a house. It's a bunch of planks and nails and coats of paint. I know there are more planks and nails and coats of paint out there that I can make my own. I really do know that. but I hung those shutters with my own 2 hands. And it hurts to let them go. Did it. I'm fairly certain that I lived several lifetimes in the past 24 hours. I'm writing this from my new living room floor, sitting on a sleeping bag and using an empty cable box as a desk. I just slayed a spider the size of a walnut, and I'm drinking tap water out of an empty CVS earplug container because I forgot to bring cups, and there is no way I'm driving over to Target until I return that damn moving trailer, because backing up a trailer in a Target parking lot sounds like a bad idea for anyone, and especially someone who just drove 7 hours with 2 furious cats and a comatose dog, and then didn't sleep, on a bed-in-a-box mattress on the floor. On my last night in my house, the doorbell rang around 8 p.m. And then it rang again and again. My friends coming over to say goodbye. No matter how much older and theoretically wiser I get, there's still this part of me that I can't get rid of that doesn't believe anyone will really miss me that much and doesn't want to make a big fuss about the fact that I'm leaving. In any case, I hadn't thought to ask anyone to come over on my last night. It didn't even occur to me. I tend to figure people are busy with their own lives. But they just came. Of course they did. So we sat around my dining room table and we ate bite-sized Hershey's bars and we talked about the last 3 years. And then they left so I could finish packing and get some sleep before my drive. After I shut the door behind them, I turned and banged my knee hard on a box. And my eyes watered up from the pain, but of course it wasn't about my knee at all. And of course I wasn't just crying, I was weeping. In the morning, I walked my kids to their school for the last time and was all weird about it, touching the trees as I passed them, trying to notice every little thing. And then I got in the car. I promised my father not to go over 50 miles an hour, and then promised him again and again and again, and just left. The drive was long, sure, but when I say it felt like several lifetimes, I mean it. First of all, I do not exaggerate when I say that my cats yowled for 7 hours straight. I didn't even know such a thing was possible, but there you go. More than that, though, there were several different people piloting that U-Haul down I-5. First, I was the weeping ex-wife who couldn't help herself and called her husband to say she was sorry for this, for all of it, everything, and that she would miss him. After that, I had a solid hour of Bengals-fueled, I'm amazing and I can do this empowerment, which ended abruptly in crushing depression, thank you, Rod Stewart, necessitating a stop at McDonald's. I spent the last leg of the trip in a state of low-grade panic, which the traffic on the 405 did nothing to help with. I pulled up to the house, got out, and the first thing that happened was that my tiny Shih Tzu fell into the pool and had to be rescued in a joint effort by me and the guy from TaskRabbit I'd hired to help me unload my plants. I ate moon pies for dinner, and I fed the cats using emptied-out instant rice containers. I am so tired, and not a little bit scared. But I made it here. I'm here, in my house, my home. It's beautiful, and it's mine. And I did it all by myself. The weekday parent. At my son's open house at his new school last night, we were given a checklist with the different projects on display so we could make sure to see them all. There was a wall where the kids had written about their favorite part of first grade. My son wrote, getting to eat breakfast in school because he has his priorities straight, and a wall displaying illustrated book reports of their favorite Dr. Seuss story. The last project on the checklist was My Home. There were little spaces where the kids filled in various facts about their home, how many pets they have, that kind of thing. In my home, there are 3 pets, my son wrote. There is 1 adult and 2 kids. I scanned the other kids' projects doing the now familiar hunt for another divorced person. I look for them everywhere, at drop-offs and playgrounds and amusement parks. They're not usually hard to spot. 2 of his classmates had 6 people living in their home, 4 adults and 2 kids. The majority of them had 4, 2 adults and 2 kids. But national statistics be damned, and nobody else had 1 adult. Nobody. I'm the weekday parent. I'm the one who pulls off the covers while they beg for just a few more minutes. No, I say, get up. I'm the one who reminds them, an average of 60 times per morning, to brush your teeth, now. This process almost always ends with me yelling because it's the only thing that makes them actually do it. I am the one who slips field trip permission slips into backpacks, Don't forget to give that to your teacher, who tells them that no, they can't have another half hour on the screens. You have to practice piano. No, you can't play with toys right now. You have to do your homework before dinner. Every weekend brings a new adventure or 5, recounted to me later in breathless tones. Dave and Buster's, Chuck E. Cheese, Comic-Con. I smile, ask questions, ooh and ah over the new toys, and ready myself for the pre-bedtime tantrums that underslept, overexcited children specialize in. That is how I participate in these adventures. I sweep up the crumbs that are left in their wake. Get up. It's time for school. I'm the rule maker, the reminder, the restrictor. I'm not fun. My daughter cried when I came home from my business trip the other night. Not the first time she's done this. Kendrick had been staying with them at my place for a couple of days, and I arrived home at 9 p.m. absolutely desperate to see them and hold them and snuggle them up in bed, a process that I had allowed myself to imagine would happen seamlessly. They'd be tired, already up far past their bedtimes, and so happy to see me that they'd fall into my arms and pass gently into sleep. I let myself have fantasies like this sometimes. But I walked through the door to find popcorn just popped, and unbrushed teeth, and promises of more books. And when I said, as I do, always, 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 no, it's too late, you have school tomorrow, you can't, my daughter cried. She didn't want her dad to leave. Then my son started crying. He didn't want to go to sleep. Then, exhausted from my business trip, the travel, the emotional hurricane I just stepped into, I started crying. Well done, me. I understand why they were upset. I understand that they miss him when he's not there, just as they miss me when I'm not there. I understand that they just want both of us all the time. But also, it's a simple fact that can't have escaped their notice. Dad leaving means that's it. Party's over. I canceled our spring break trip. We were going to go to Mexico, but it didn't happen for various boring logistical reasons. God damn it, though, I wanted to go on that trip so badly. I wanted just for once to be the hero, the parent who takes them to do fun things and lets them stay up late and eat ice cream whenever they want and isn't constantly saying no, no, no. I want to be the yes parent, even if it's just for a week. A few hours after I pulled the plug on our trip, I picked the kids up from school. So about spring break, I said, we're not going to Mexico anymore. What are we going to do? They wanted to know. We went home and I drew a little calendar for them. I filled in the boxes, a beach day, a pool day, a day at a water park. There was one box where I'd written lazy day because I'd run out of ideas. My son pointed to it. What's that day? He asked. That's our day for doing nothing but sitting on the couch together and snuggling and watching movies, I told him. Oh, he smiled, his huge gap-toothed 7-year-old smile. And then, that day is my favorite one. Loud House. When I think about the first time I lived in LA, right after college, when I moved out to California to look for acting work, there's rarely anyone else there in those memories. It wasn't like I spent all my time alone. I had friends and I had my boyfriend, but most of the time, whether by choice or not, I was. Me at the do-it-yourself car wash feeding quarters into the soap machine. Me driving north towards Santa Barbara, then turning around when I got there and driving right back. Me wandering through the Fairfax Farmers Market, buying a donut, just to have a thing to do. I was so lonely. Nearly everything in my life today looks different than it did then. But here it is again. Come back into my life like palm trees and the 405 freeway. The loneliness. It hit me yesterday when I was making lunch because that's how it seems to work. The simplest, smallest moments always seem to be the ones that bring you to your knees. I was just standing there in the kitchen squeezing mustard onto bread, and all of a sudden I saw myself, years from now, standing there in the kitchen squeezing mustard onto bread, eating my sandwich standing up because there's no point in sitting if it's just me. Isn't it crazy how loud an empty house can be? I haven't really had much time to feel lonely yet. I've been busy, what with an enormous life upheaval and the court dramatics and the move and the 2 young children who need schools and uniforms and lunches and something approaching stability. I have friends here, more than I'd realize. We make plans. We fill up our weekends with trampoline jumps and sushi and Ferris wheel rides. Whenever I have a free minute, there's a project to fill it. A box that's still sitting unemptied, towel racks to install, a bed to assemble. I'm grateful for those projects. They keep me distracted, and distraction feels better than its opposite. It wasn't until yesterday afternoon that I stopped moving for a second and all of a sudden realized, as in fully realized, the fact that my children were not with me because there's an order that said that they had to be with someone else. And yeah, they were in school at the time, and sure, I wouldn't have had them right then even if it was my day, but still, in that moment, I couldn't have them. I could not have my kids. Here are a few facts. My marriage is gone. It's not coming back. My husband doesn't love me anymore, or at least not in the way he did. It's possible no one else will ever love me as much as he used to. My children will grow up with parents who live in different homes. They will probably always be a little bit sad about that. My decision created holes in our life that I don't know will ever be filled. I did that. I have to live with that. I will have days, weeks, where I will not be with my children. I will miss them often and furiously like I do right now. These are realities that I have to accept, and I do, but still, they are hard pills to swallow. I woke up exhausted yesterday morning. The night before, Kendrick had come to pick up the kids, and I'd gotten all excited about the idea of watching something other than Teen Titans Go. Visions of sleeping until 9 started fluttering through my head, and so I stayed up until 1:30 a.m. watching The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. Except then, because I'm a parent and old, I woke up at 6 a.m., despite the fact that I really didn't have to, and that was that. By midday, I was the kind of tired that made me a little frantic and found myself pacing from room to room, half completing every task I started and getting nowhere with any of them. And then there I was, standing in my kitchen, crying into a ham sandwich. I called my best friend, and she told me to just stop, take a sick day. Close the shutters, she said, get in bed and spend some time doing nothing at all. This is not a thing I am good at doing. So we decided that instead of calling what I was doing giving up, my words, we'd call it taking to my bed, hers. I enjoy that phrase enormously. It sounds very glamorous in French, like perhaps one has acquired a touch of cholera or maybe a hint of consumption. And you can't be held responsible for anything you do when you've acquired a touch of cholera or a hint of consumption, right? Around 4 p.m., I took to my bed. I put on Netflix and stole a bunch of mini Butterfingers from my kids' Halloween stash, and for 2 entire hours, I did nothing. It got dark early. Daylight savings, you know. When I got up, I went into the backyard and sat down and realized that I didn't want to launch myself into the process of catching up from a day largely wasted. I didn't want to do any of the things I would typically do while sitting in my backyard. Check my phone, call a friend, water the plants, etc. I just wanted to sit there, think. For some reason, this one day kept running through my mind. A day before our daughter was born, our son was maybe 1.5. We decided to take a drive up to a farm we liked. We bought sandwiches and ate them on the picnic bench. And when we were done, I took my son's hands in my own and I swung him back and forth around and around while he giggled like a little maniac, and Kendrick took photographs of us. It wasn't an especially exciting day. I don't know why it got stuck in my head. I suppose I just remember feeling that morning like life would always be that way. The 3 of us, together, laughing, spinning in the sun, nothing to do but decide where we want to go next. One last thing. I wrote this post in the morning, and in the afternoon, Kendrick came over to grab some things before picking up the kids at school. We decided to go pick them up together and then take them to ice cream. When our son climbed into the car, he stared at us for a minute. "It's been a long time since we've done this," he said. "Drive with both of you in the same car." It has been. We picked up our daughter next, and then we drove to Baskin-Robbins. We sat there in our plastic seats with our plastic spoons, our son explaining some coding game he just learned, and our daughter chattering away about ice cream cake. It wasn't perfect. Kendrick and I got on each other's nerves and snapped at each other once or twice. But still. When we were done and headed back to the car, my daughter clung to my legs for a moment and asked me if I was going to get in the car too. She wanted to know if next time maybe I could stay longer. I told her I would. And I was telling her the truth. I think I can. And I think we will. So I buckled her in, sat down in the passenger seat of the car that was once ours and is now just his, and we, the four of us, decided where we wanted to go next. The fifth line. The other day, my daughter pointed to one of the jagged lines crisscrossing her palm. What are those cracks, she wanted to know. So I pulled up a sort of palmistry 101 website, and we sat there labeling each one. All right, so that one's your lifeline, I told her. That spot where it divides, that's when something big changes, like maybe you get a really cool new job. After we covered the major lines, life, head, heart, fate, we twisted our hands from side to side looking for the smaller cracks, then scrolling through the website to find out what they meant. Those little lines in between the index finger and the middle finger represent your kids, and I showed her how I have two. That's you and your brother, I said. Then I turned my hand over and, silently, counted the horizontal lines below my pinky, the love lines. They're supposed to say how many significant relationships you'll have, so I think it's safe to say I counted them with some interest. Over the course of my life, I've had 4 relationships that I would call significant, whether for their length or their intensity or for both. On my hand, just below my little finger, there are 5 lines. So here's the thing I've been thinking about lately. When you blow up your life, as I did just a few months ago, you find yourself sitting on a pile of ashes. Everything you thought you wanted, everything you thought you had, everything you saw in your future, it's just gone. Erased with a single sentence. Your mouth opens and you dismantle your world with your words. But when you take something apart, even if it goes all the way down to the bare bones, you're still left with those fundamental elements, the building blocks that started it all. And you get to begin building again. It's an exciting realization that what you're holding in your hands amounts to virtually endless possibilities. It's also paralyzing. I remember this feeling from a long, long time ago. I wrote about it way back in 2012 when we were deciding whether to buy our first house. And I found myself lying awake at night wondering how in the world anyone picks a lane when there are so many roads that could be traveled. One day you say to yourself, I'll move to Italy and I'll have a yard full of lemon trees. Or maybe I'll buy a place in California right on the ocean. Or maybe I'll find a gorgeous townhouse in the far reaches of Brooklyn. All you know is that where you are right then isn't where you'll likely stay. And there's something very freeing in that knowledge. You don't know where you'll be, but you know it won't be where you are. It's a wonderful thing, a privilege to feel that you can do anything. But it also makes it really hard to finally choose what you want to do. I did end up choosing, of course. We bought a house, and in taking that leap, we set off down a path that I came to understand. I was a homeowner. I was an entertainer. I had a plan for the future, and it was a good one, a solid one, the right one. I was wrong. So where does that leave me now? It's not about relationships or men, although that's part of it, of course. It's about the fact that I'm off the track, with no real idea what life will look like 10 years down the road. And the idea of picking a lane again is a terrifying prospect, because I've blown it all up once, and I can't do it again. I can't do it to myself, and I can't do it to my children. I want to get it right this time. I only have one more line. Every once in a while, my children will ask me an impossible question, a question that I've never been able to answer even in my own head. And over, I've discovered that in answering these questions for them, I learn what I believe. I suppose that's because in some ways it's easier to tell them the truth than it is to tell it to myself. When my daughter asked about the lines on her hand, I explained to her that we weren't doing magic. Palm reading, or tarot, or any form of divination for that matter, isn't a party trick, and there's no right answer. It doesn't matter what anyone sees except for you. Whatever you think the lines mean, that's what they mean. I kept it simple, of course. She is so small. But maybe, years from now, my daughter will ask me again about the lines under her little finger, wanting to know what they say, what they really say. And here is what I will tell her if she does. They say that you are hopeful. They say that you are afraid. They say that you know love is waiting for you, even if you don't know what it's going to look like when you get there. And if she points to the last line and asks, what if I get the last one wrong? You know what I'll tell her then? I'll tell her she can't get it wrong. It's simply not possible. Because sitting here at my kitchen counter right this very moment, walking through this maybe future conversation in my mind, it happened again. I told my child the truth, and I found out what I believe. That last line isn't another person at all. It's you. And my fifth line, it's me, loving myself. All the rest is just a beautiful bonus. But that's just how I read it. Now, I started at the beginning, and so the beginning is where I'll return to. Remember my pawn shop ring? Many years later, shortly before we got divorced, the ring lost its diamonds. I had it fixed, but then it went missing, never to be seen again. It felt, in hindsight, like an omen. We broke, and then we disappeared. Except that's not where the story ends. Last night, my husband, the same man who asked me to marry him naked and tipsy and kneeling on the floor of a crappy hotel room all those years ago, came over for dinner. We do these special family nights a lot. We all eat dinner together, then play a game or watch a little TV. He helps the kids practice piano because they're starting to be too good for me to teach. When thinking about what I wanted to make for dinner that night, I remembered an apple and pork medallion dish that I'd served at a long-ago dinner party for our friends Stephen, Dave, Francesca, and Bevan. One we threw in our first real apartment to feel like real grown-ups. We all dressed up. I set the table with actual placemats and our wedding china. We drank champagne and danced around the living room. And then we sat down to eat, and I swear this is true. Somehow it ended up with all of us spontaneously holding hands while we sang Amazing Grace. I don't even know who started the hand-holding and the singing, or if anyone in particular started it at all. It felt inevitable, like the only thing that could be done. It was one of those moments when everything, where we were, who we were, our friendships, our futures, was perfect, virtually alight with promise. I thought I'd make that same dish again, ostensibly so I could get some good shots of one of the first meals I'd ever made, and one that still ranks highly among the best, but also to help us remember. My daughter helped me flip the pork. My son folded napkins for the table, no placemats this time. Kendrick filled the water glasses while I sliced the pork. We are not young, not anymore. Our children hold that title now, moving us solidly into the throes of middle age. Our world is different than it was the first time we sat around a table sharing this dinner in more ways than I can list. Our friends have moved, married, had babies of their own. Our wedding china is long gone, the victim of too many moves to too many homes. We've broken so many parts of what was, but we've also built skyscrapers out of pure love. We sit at a different table now, in a different state. The champagne has turned into juice, and the songs we sing now are nursery rhymes. But we are still there, after all this time, sitting around a table, passing the butter, talking about where we want to go next. And all the possibility still leaves me breathless. I think that ring was an omen after all, but not in the way it initially seemed. I like that it was so odd and flawed and special. I like that even though it fell apart over time, we did what we could to put it back together and fix what needed fixing, while leaving what was beautiful just so. We did eventually replace it in a way, but not with a ring. With matching tattoos of a Buddhist symbol called an enzo. It's a circle painted in one fell swoop with only one chance to perform it to completion. There is, in other words, no going back. And its imperfection is what makes it beautiful. Life shifts, circumstances change, but our weird, wonderful little family isn't going anywhere. Not today. Not ever. I know this because it says so, right there on our arms. Thank you so much for listening. This is Jordan Reed, and this is the Ramshackle Glam audioblog.